Vampire Survivors has brought out its own auto-shooter with roguelike element genre of game, and I've been loving it. And whilst I've found other games that I probably prefer more, like Brotato, I think is the pinnacle of this genre for me personally, I've been looking at other games and kind of finding that they're too copycatty to really dive into and stand out in this genre that's already become quite packed quite quickly. One game that has stood out for me, though, is Goobies, and that's today's review. It's an auto-shooter with roguelike elements that is all focused on gooey blobs chasing you around and trying to kill you literally in their hundreds. This screen gets busy, and so do your champions that you take control of. There are 5 in total at the moment to unlock. You have to unlock them through playing through the game multiple times and over the course of hours, fulfilling certain kill rates and all of that kind of stuff. But each champion handles or plays slightly differently. You've got your kind of man-in-the-middle version, which is relatively fast, got quite a quick auto shot, and you can lean into projectile upgrades with this character because, again, building up the base stats, as soon as you kill a certain amount of enemies, you level up, and then you get to choose from randomly generated upgrades. Because this character is the most basic one, it also gives you some additional rare upgrades to choose from, which is quite handy. But if you don't want to stay basic bitch, I would say, you can then go out to other Gooby champions. And there's one that has a streak of fire that runs around behind wherever you've been, which is very handy. There's another one that adds on a slower shot, but it's more like a bomb, so it has an area of effect blast that goes on. Each of these different champions has slightly different stats. They all lean into different gameplay styles, and it's fun to then upgrade them in different directions. Goobies has lots and lots of upgrades that you can choose from. Some of them are about the character itself, about starting to put on like a auto-replenish of HP, very wise, but also increasing their speed of attack, general damage, but also damage of certain types of attacks, such as projectiles or area of effect weapons. Goobies has a real penchant towards making area of effect attacks much more prominent and destructive than a lot of other games seem to, and I found quite a lot of my builds varying towards this style. And what I mean by area of attack, it's that as, say, a enemy dies, it would explode, or it would catch fire and everything around it would catch fire for a few seconds too. And that would kick off a chain of effect of lots and lots of other things exploding or catching fire or causing problems as it goes throughout the actual wave of hundreds of enemies coming towards you. Each weapon or upgrade has variations of its upgrades. So it will say like a 15% chance of causing an enemy to catch fire when it explodes. And then the next one will be 30, but it will also increase the amount of damage that it gives too. And this can be very handy, not just for just attacks, but then the actual stats for your character that you're controlling. And also a lot of passive abilities that kind of allow you to build out your character into even more of a version of your own champion that you want to be. And by that I mean things like you can start to have attacks split off into like mini weapons afterwards, or you can have like a howl that follows you around that acts as a mini barrier to stop enemies trying to touch you and kill you, for example. Every few levels you take place on the island, you'll have mini bosses that will come around that will give you a roulette wheel for upgrades, but then you'll get a random boss encounter at the end of these randomly generated islands too. They're largely quite fun. They have very basic attacks, but when you're busy battling a boss and you've got hundreds of enemies chasing you around, it gets really busy, and it's almost like a culmination in a drip feed of lots and lots of things being thrown at you is usually what pushes you over the edge with Goobies, rather than you just having to battle against a couple of enemies here or there. There's lots of enemies that when they die, they then explode into like 100 tinier versions of themselves. And so, whilst I would recommend having a relatively decent PC, it is quite fun to just watch this swarm of goo chase you around and watching it then explode as your chain reactions cause lots and lots of fun and drama as you unpack your weapons. This game is one that requires a lot of replaying because obviously it's got that roguelike element built into it. You can upgrade the base stats of your character over time, which is quite helpful, but you'll also be unlocking different game variants as well, which can put multipliers on your score. Some of them make the game easier, some make it harder, and the multiplier of your score reflects that. The game itself also has a kind of defined endpoint, although I've never been able to actually get there. It seems that the game tops out when you get your character to level 89. I've been able to get mine up into the 50s and 60s, and at that point, the game is starting to slow down because there is so much going on the screen. Less around like the hundreds of enemies, but you've got hundreds of XP pallets that are just strewn around everywhere, and XP almost becomes impossible to be bothered about because the floor is basically blue orbs rather than you having some kind of island with lots of scenery to run around, such as rocks that might trap you into a dead end and mean it's game over for you very quickly. I thoroughly enjoyed Goobies. I've had great fun playing it over the last week or so. And yeah, a big thumbs up from me. This, alongside Vampire Survivors and Brotato, I think are my top 3 of this top-down auto-shooter roguelike genre so far. Since its launch, there's been quite a few updates and fixes to various different bugs. The dev's really chatty in the forums and seems to be ironing out stuff really, really quickly, which is great to see. And I'm really, really pleased and happy that this game is out there and giving a cutesy gooey version of an auto shooter where you can feel king. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.